Tech Real.
Yes.
I'm in bed.
You are. That is
and
a
I want
factual
to be in a bed
statement.
today. Yeah.
Man.
I wanted to be in a bed today.
I'm mentally in my bed.
Hey, you know, that's the vibe of the day, and that's all right. Because what are we talking about today, Tech Real?
Well, first we should probably say hello to the people. Hi, people.
Oh!
My name's Tech Real.
And I'm Amy.
Welcome to Side-ology.
Hi, welcome back.
We're here to give our classic 60% today. Because we're
That's
a little tired, but it's okay.
I'm a little tired today.
It's how it goes. You know, based on the subject of the day, I think it's somewhat fitting. Would you like to reveal the subject of the day?
Oh my god, today, guys, hold on to your hats or your beds, because that's what I'm sitting in. So today...
I didn't have a hat. I desperately looked around for a hat.
It's okay, it's okay. So today, we are talking
physical
about...
comedy. Nobody can see this. I have a duck on my head.
Yeah, Tech Real.
It fell.
Oh, it fell. Oh.
Wonderful. Anyways.
Anyway. So today, we are talking about a little known thing called maladaptive daydreaming.
We are.
Because, and how it relates to Sandersides potentially, because this is something that both Tech Real and I experience, and we thought it would relate pretty well. So we're gonna walk around that a little bit, walk through the forest of maladaptive daydreaming.
We are, because our theory here, quote unquote theory, we'll get into that a little bit later, it being a theory, but our consensus here is the idea that character Thomas in universe is in fact a maladaptive daydreamer and is actively maladaptive daydreaming throughout these episodes.
Whoa.
But contain your excitement, because for the viewers at home who may not know, we need to first define what maladaptive daydreaming is. And I might be able to do that.
Tech Real, what is maladaptive daydreaming?
Well, it's funny you ask.
Be the studious one here.
I was gonna say, I actually did research for this episode comparatively to you today. So, like, I'm actually the studious. It's your turn to be the layman.
I'm the layman. Literally, I need everyone in the podcast realm to know that when Tech Real said he did research for this, I literally went, what? I got so excited. Because, like, the first episode that we genuinely, like, I guess the first episode we had some research, or the second one.
I would say the second one. The first episode was more about us.
One. Either way, one of the first episodes that we're genuinely introducing something new or something different.
And I'm the one who did the research, which is so atypical to the normal format.
We trade off laymanship and studio.
We definitely, I think me doing the research today is very much indicative of the fact that this is a subject that is very close to my heart, and especially in recent years as I've learned about it, because, like, we'll get into that. First, defining what maladaptive daydreaming is. So, maladaptive daydreaming, according to research. Hold on. Now I need to pull up my research.
According to research.
According to my research, as
Logan.
DA would
Logan,
say. No. Oh, sorry, I was channeling my inner DA from Magic School Bus.
Oh, that's valid.
Yeah.
Too. Honestly, I'd probably take that.
Yeah, not my favorite character, but definitely one of my favorite catchphrases of that show. Other than Carlos.
Carlos. That kills people.
No. We ain't talking Charlie the Unicorn. So, maladaptive daydreaming is a term and phenomenon coined by Eli Sommer circa 2002. So it's very recent. Basically, whoa, geez, I did something that's going to be seen in the video. Oh, well. We're going real rustic today. So, maladaptive daydreaming is a behavior where a person spends an excessive this is why I'm the layman. An excessive amount of time daydreaming, often becoming immersed in their imagination. This behavior is usually a coping mechanism in people who have mental health conditions like anxiety. Specifically, to quote an article from Sommer himself, individuals with elevated maladaptive daydreaming seem to create ideal alternative life scenarios in fantasies featuring themes of self-idealization, power, this is my favorite bit, or revenge.
Revenge. So, Mr. Studious One, give me an example of maladaptive daydreaming.
So yeah, to try to put it into simpler terms. Basically, so there is typical daydreaming. A lot of people, daydream typically in their day. Which is just a brief moment of imagining something else and, imagining either a scenario or some fantasy. Maladaptive daydreaming, conversely, is when that behavior comes a bit more frequently and becomes more of a compulsive thing. When you find yourself sort of leaning on it more heavily, again, as said, using it as a coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm. As clarification then, if you're just kind of sitting in class thinking about what the weekend's going to look like, that's just daydreaming.
That's just daydreaming. That is just a simple daydream that is very common amongst basically everybody.
So does maladaptive daydreaming require you to get up and act out scenarios?
I don't know that I would say it requires you to act out the scenarios physically. I know that's very common amongst maladaptive daydreamers. It's definitely one of the reasons that I found out that I was that, because I found a TikTok of people doing that as such and demonstrating that it's a very... Yeah.
I didn't know you found this out through TikTok.
Yeah, no. So to dip into a little bit later, we're going to get into a bit more of our own personal experiences, but I originally found out that I'm a maladaptive daydreamer, which is a very hard term to vocalize when you have my mouth.
Try to say that 3 times fast.
I can't say it 1 time slow. So...
That was the perfect joke.
I'm very glad. As it came out of my mouth, I got really happy.
Maladaptive daydream.
Yeah, it's difficult. But no, I originally found out that I maladaptive daydream because I saw it on a TikTok. It was demonstrating behavior of someone pacing the room as they were enacting a daydream in their head, which is very common amongst maladaptive daydreamers. A lot of them pace around or, get up, or they'll act it out physically in either an out loud or quiet way. And I saw that, and either in the caption or the hashtag or something, it said maladaptive daydreaming, and I saw it and I was like, oh, I do that? That's what that's called? It's not a normal thing? Oh, neat. Add that to the list of things I have.
Also to add on, maladaptive daydreaming could be uncontrollable daydreaming, even just zoning out and just having a scenario happen in your head, even if you're not directly acting anything out.
Yeah, I think it's much more about the compulsive dissociation than it is about the specific way in which you enact it. I don't think it has to be a full, physical presentation of what you're doing. I think it's just the act of compulsively finding the need to immerse yourself in daydreams throughout your day.
And these daydreams could be acting out realistic scenarios. You talked a little bit about this, but I'm just going over it for myself.
Oh, of course.
Realistic scenarios, just made up scenarios. Some people, I'm wondering, I guess we should have looked this up before. I'm wondering how this relates to reality shifting.
That is a very different thing, I believe.
I think that's a different thing.
I think that could possibly be somewhat connected, depending on... But I think reality shifting, the people who believe in reality shifting are a lot more under the impression that they are traversing dimensions through their sleep.
That, and they're not, compulsively doing anything.
No, that seems to be fully a choice that they're trying to escape their reality, intentionally. And I don't think... Okay. I think part of maladaptive daydreaming is, can be somewhat intentional. Again, it is, at the end of the day, a coping mechanism. So it's definitely something that people lean on, and that some people are maybe more comfortable with than others, and maybe lean into doing it more. I know that sort of applies to me in some ways. But maladaptive daydreaming in itself, I think, is more compulsive than anything. So even without that intention, you still feel that, need to scratch that itch.
Right. Okay, yeah, so
that's basically what maladaptive daydreaming is.
Maladaptive.
I need a few less consonants in that word.
In the words of Patton Sanders, gosh, words can be tough.
Yeah, oh, man. There's a reason for a long time that I specifically said that I kinned Patton more than anyone. Because of that line.
That one line. It was no other reason. It was just
that one specific sentiment.
Good.
Indeed.
Excellent.
So hopefully that gives, everyone a cursory idea of what maladaptive daydreaming is as a concept.
For extra clarification, we're gonna start talking about our experiences with maladaptive daydreaming, because I know for me, my experience has been, gosh, I don't really, I still hesitate to even call it maladaptive daydreaming, but I know it is.
Yeah.
Basically,
You told me about yours, so I believe you're still qualified.
Yeah, I think it is, because I have instances where I will act out stories that I've made up, or I also would like pretend I'm playing certain characters because I'm, I do that acting thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if y'all know that
acting thing.
That acting thing, I do that a little bit. But as a kid, I remember like acting out book series that I would be reading and really like. I would act out characters from TV shows that I wanted to be. I would act out. I know like when I'm nervous about a future conversation, I'll like envision that conversation actually happening in front of me, and I'll do that all the time.
Yeah.
Or just envisioning some kind of like scenario in my life that would be like a dream that I've had in some capacity. Like, for example, I've always wanted my own show, to be able to like write a show and be able to tour with it or whatever. I've imagined like what it would be like to perform in that show, what it would be like to talk to people after the show, and just like talking in that scenario. But in terms of the compulsivity of it, I definitely have moments where like if I have an idea of something that I want to stand up and act out, I really have to do it right then. It's funny because like I also have ADHD, so executive dysfunction is my favorite thing in the world. And it happens to me all the time.
Love it.
If you don't know what that is, executive dysfunction is the inability to start if you need to do some kind of task or something, or like, for example, getting up and brushing your teeth and getting a shower or something. That energy to get up isn't always present in me. So it's funny when I have an impulse to maladaptive daydream and I'm stuck in executive dysfunction, I will stand up instantly. I will get up and go. Like, it was the most annoying thing the other day because it happened like, I think yesterday. I stood up and I was like, really? That's what made you stand up? And I just got, but like, I had fun.
That's how it goes.
Yeah, that's my experience with it. I know Tech Reels is more in depth.
Oh yeah.
But
I know we've talked about it, and mine is definitely a lot more potent, I suppose to be the term. So, I'm trying to think even where to begin. It's so funny because I don't think I've talked about this yet, in this recording, but this is the first time I've ever actually explained that I do this anywhere publicly on the internet, ever. So, it's kind of funky.
I want to say this publicly as well. That's super, like, brave.
Oh my gosh.
I think it's super brave for both of us to be talking about it, but, like, with the depth that you do it, I think that's really cool.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But, so, where do I even begin? I feel like, so, to track, I've been doing this for years. Like, into a capacity, I cannot think of a time of my life anymore, like, in recent time, where I haven't been doing it. Like, in the past, 5 years, I can't think of a moment when I haven't done it. A day where I haven't done it. Like, it's quite literally a daily, possibly even hourly thing. Like, it's consistent.
And I think with mine happens, like, I'd say every few days.
Yeah.
I don't usually have it happen to me as often. But yeah, I can remember, I know I've been acting things out since I was like younger, much younger.
Yeah, well, I mean, younger makes more sense to me because that's like general playing pretend.
But even then, like let me say it this way. When I was a kid, my favorite game was pretend.
Yeah.
So like, even if I was playing it alone or with other people, like, this is not something that was abnormal to me.
That's fair. You really teed your future self up for it.
Yeah, that's kind of why I've had trouble defining this as maladaptive daydreaming for myself, because it really is something I've been doing all my life, and just pretend is just kind of where I live.
Yeah, that makes sense. You get used to it after a while, and then it's just like, this is normal. Yeah. Like, this is the normal. But no, I maladaptive daydream all types of things. Like, I the full spectrum of it, because I will, daydream such things as simple conversations, or, things I'm getting ready to talk about with people, or things I wish I could say to people, etc., etc. I maladaptive daydream like things that I hope to do or things I wish I could do, like a lot of like wish fulfillment fantasy type of things. Like similar to like what you said, like doing shows and doing like episodes of things. I've maladaptive daydreamed this episode of the podcast. Like literally last night. Literally probably most of today, I'm sure. Like, and several times in the weeks leading up. Like, the moment we thought of this, immediately that's what I thought of. And I started... I've maladaptive daydreamed several, like, episodes of this podcast. Like, not fully, but, like, definitely, like, moments. Like, intros of it.
Because, I mean, honestly, it said... One of the things in the article that I remember seeing is it's because of anxiety, usually. Yeah. Or anxiety plays some kind of role in it.
Yeah, anxiety, depression... I've also heard OCD. Is a potential thing of it.
Yeah, because... Yeah, I know I have an anxiety disorder. Mm-hmm. So like a lot of the conversations that I've envisioned having are the harder ones, the ones that I'm really nervous to say what I want to say. Like, for example, interviews or like hard conversations with friends or whatever, like those things that I frequently maladaptive daydream.
Oh, seriously, same. Like a good chunk of my maladaptive daydreaming is like getting ready to deal with friends or imagining things I could be doing with friends or how to say a certain thing, especially when I'm nervous to deal with a situation. It's a lot of that. And then on top of those other two things, the big chunk of mine, I think this is definitely like one of the bigger chunks, is, and I feel like this is, from what I've heard, this is very common amongst maladaptive daydreamers, is I have such a complex, interconnected story just stored up here. It's just
freaking cool.
Like, it's literally like a multi-dimensional story, all interconnected across a single semi-consistent canon.
It's like a, I mean, I know people do like role play on different sites or whatever. Like, this is like your own personal.
It is.
Like, thought train of like an adventure. That's so cool.
It really is. That's legitimately what it is. And like regularly, I'll find myself with the desire, the need, the compulsion to just sort of jump into a scene or, amongst different, like, again, I have several universes connected to it of different, like, media and franchises that I love.
Should we define what the compulsion feels like? For people who
I know
don't
we said before it's sort of like scratching an itch. It really kind of is because, like, how would you describe it then?
I don't know if I describe, because people have said that about like tics too, and I have some head twitches sometimes, and I don't agree with that either. Mm-hmm. But I think I'd probably say like you really have this like sudden intense desire to like if you're craving something, it's like a craving, I guess is a better word for it for me. Like if I'm wanting to play if, for example, like you're sitting at school and you really want to go home and play a game and that's all you can think about, that's kind of this, but it's like really intense to the point that like if you don't, you're going to get frustrated that you're not.
That's a good way to describe it.
I would rather, I think craving is a better word than itch. Because an itch is like, I mean, obviously, I guess an itch maybe, but like craving is probably where I would come at it from.
That's fair. I don't know how I would describe it other than an itch. My brain is trying to come up with some strange analogy of it. My immediate thought is like my head is just filling up with that desire like liquid. And like and it's like my head is getting heavy and it's like blocking out my vision, and the only way to do it is just like tap like empty it out from like just like out the ear. Butterfingers. And just like empty it all. What?
I said, let me reference Sandersides every way that
Please always do.
Okay, gotcha.
I gotta empty the butterfingers out of my head. We're gonna explain it like this now. My head's full of butterfingers.
You gotta empty out all those butterfingers.
This is now the way I have to always explain it when I have to maladaptive daydream and be like, oh man, full of butterfingers, tap tap.
Oh my God, we're just trying to make this as complicated as possible for everybody listening.
Truly. And we haven't even gotten into how it connects to Sandersides yet. But no, yeah, it really is just sort of the thing that like I will be in the middle of watching a video. Like, not even, a lot of people will daydream during doing something that they don't want to be doing, like work, school, some other chore. I will be in the middle of entertainment, in the middle of watching a movie or a TV show or like a YouTube video typically, And sometimes I'll just be like, be hit with that urge, and I'll be like, man, it reminds me of something, or it made me think of a potential concept that I can daydream. And I'm just like, shit, I gotta do that now. So I'll like pause the video, I'll get up out of my chair, I'll stand up, and I'll just do that for the next like 10 minutes. And then I'll be like, okay, once I'm finally done with that, I just sit back down and play.
And another massive part of this that like makes it difficult. I hadn't really thought about this for me. That was always a struggle for me at school because I would be like doing homework or something and I would start daydreaming about like, oh, well, this is something I want to do like for my show that I need for like my final project or whatever. And then once I had that idea, I had to stand up. Who cares if it's due in an hour? I had to get up and do it anyway. And I got really frustrated watching, like, because then you snap out of it, like in the middle of the daydream, you look up at the clock and it's like 30 minutes past and you're like, fuck, where'd that 30 minutes go? And I'm like, oh shit. And then I have to go back and finish it. And that was consistently part of my problem, especially with having ADHD at school, like an executive dysfunction on top of that. It just sucked.
I'll be getting ready to do something. And I'll be sitting on my bed in the middle of a maladaptive daydream, looking at the clock, you'll be like, okay, I'll just let myself do this for like no longer than a half an hour. And I'll just like, and then the time will pass and I'll be like, no, I'm not done yet. I just can't be done yet. And it's not even that I'm like trying to fulfill one long thing. Sometimes it's a repetition. Like, I don't know if you do that. It's just the same, you just want to do that same scene over and over again. Sometimes like just start again. I'll do the same thing with music. Like, I just like that repetition sometimes. I just crave that one specific scene. And I'll be done with it. I'll be like, I kind of want to do that again.
Yeah.
Anyone's ever seen that SpongeBob scene where, like, what was it, King Neptune is just, like, eats the Krabby Patty? He's like, I think I'll have another. He just, like, spits it out, reforms it, eats it again. You know what I'm talking about? It's that, but maladaptive daydreaming.
It literally is. And it's...
How many food-related analogies can we bring into maladaptive daydreaming? Butterfingers, Krabby Patties...
I think that's part of the thing about just destigmatizing mental illness in general is really hard because like talking about this, you and I understand this completely because we both do. To people who don't do this, it's really hard to explain exactly how that feels.
It really is, yeah.
And like, it feels like something you can just be like, for someone who probably doesn't do it, they're probably like, oh, well, you could just stop then go back to you can. Sometimes it's annoying.
Like sometimes I can get past it if I need to. Like if I'm in the middle of a situation where I need to, like, or if I'm around family, obviously I can't. But like even in those situations, I'll like be going to the bathroom and I'll just like look at myself in the mirror and just get caught in it for a second. I'll be like, I need to get out. It really is so entrancing.
I get so frustrated. I get so frustrated if I get interrupted or if I have to stop or if I have to do like, especially if I have to like whenever I was at school, just looking back at homework and being like, shit, I have to do that.
Yeah.
And I just sit down and I'm like still thinking about it, but I have to be like, no. And then you can't focus because you're still thinking about that.
You know, I said entrancing. Trance is a very interesting way to put the feeling of being in it. It really is like you just sort of get hypnotically like just drawn to it.
It's dissociative. That's pretty much what it is.
Magnetic. Like there's it like drawn to needing to do it is so the way to describe it. It's such a weird abstract feeling. But like, yeah, the way I could only, it's interesting trying to think of like how people would perceive this who don't know about this phenomenon. It really is a weird compulsion to need to lean on pretending to deal with your life. Because a lot of the reason that people do this is, again, anxiety, depression, it's you know, trauma, it's dealing with, you know, loneliness. Loneliness is a big part of it as well, I know. And I know for me, I think that's a good piece of it because I've been like secluded in this room for the past like 2 decades, more or less. So like, you know, with very little, like my friends being in other like states or countries even. So it really, like, it is a seclusion piece for me. A good chunk of it anyways. And it's a lot of that just like feeling like the world around you just isn't really enough as of right now. And just like needing more from it. And the only more that you can get from it is from your own brain, just giving those stories and narratives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's so weird talking about this.
So fascinating. It's weird, but it's just a fascinating thing because like the brain is, this is one of the reasons I love psychology in the first place. It's just the brain is so cool that it gives you that escapism. But at the same time, it's just not it doesn't focus on, you know, time and priorities and things, but like even then it's just a really nice when it's not like affecting your time, it's a really nice way to escape.
It really is. Not a way that I would recommend necessarily, but I mean, like in the sense that I wouldn't it's a coping mechanism at the end of the day, so I wouldn't like as effective as it is, I wouldn't wish it upon someone. I wouldn't say it's something that you should desire, but it's neutral. It's neutral is the good term for it.
Mm-hmm. And I also think that if you I don't think you can just do it. I don't think you
can't just choose to.
If you don't do it already, I don't think it's possible for you to start doing it.
Choosing
because like
to do it would just be daydreaming.
I think it's just daydreaming when you want to, because most of the time when TechReal and I have talked about this, and after reading the article, it really is a matter of like we don't necessarily want to. It's more like we have to almost.
I'd say it's
like,
a 50-50 for me.
Really
like,
have to.
I like, want to-ish, but it's also a compulsion.
Sometimes, but like the times where it's a compulsion makes it maladaptive.
Yes, exactly. The desire and need to. The pull to is what makes it maladaptive daydreaming, not just the desire to daydream.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a very big difference between deciding to daydream often and being, compulsed to do so. Yeah,
the absolute urge to just do it.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that maladaptive daydreaming could just be you sitting there thinking about and daydreaming like in your mind.
I'd say so. I don't know if people would disagree with that in like the maladaptive daydreaming community, but like I would say so. Because I mean, nowhere in the descriptions, in some descriptions I've read, but most of them are more specifying the daydreaming and not specifically specifying the acting it out. That's said every here and there, but I think that's just because maladaptive daydreamers tend to already act it out, so it's already somewhat synonymous.
Yeah, because that's all I've known.
Yeah.
I mean, I do daydream to an extent, but then I start like speaking it out.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's not even just in the head. I will like vocalize. I'll either out loud say it or I'll like mouth the words as it's in my brain. Like it isn't. I can't just sort of sit there usually and just not say it and just have it in the brain. I have to like get up and do it.
Mm-hmm.
Man.
Absolutely. Yep.
Now one more interesting question before we break off to Mind Palace Moment Land and get to the meat of today's episode, the meat and potatoes. One interesting question regarding our own maladaptive daydreaming. If you could, or I guess would you ever want to like stop maladaptive daydreaming now that it's become like somewhat part of what your brain is? No.
Absolutely not. Because your reason's probably going to be different than mine. My reason is I think it's helped me become a better actor. I think it really like is part of what gets me into character when I do acting, and also like it helps me brainstorm a lot. Oh my gosh, like if I'm having trouble thinking of like the way to end a sketch or the way to finish off a scene, I'll maladapt or I'll daydream. I'll get up and I'll actually like act out whatever scene it is, and then I'll do that and that was partially inspired by like devising classes I did in the past. So like that kind of blurs that line for me again, because I'm like, well, it might just be like brainstorming and acting, but at the same time, like sometimes I do compulsively get up and do it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's become such a useful tool for me on top of the compulsion that like I don't think I'd ever get rid of it at this point. I feel like it would take a really massive piece of my acting core. Yeah.
That's fair.
What about you?
I also don't think I would ever want to stop. It's interesting. I don't really know fully the reason though. Maybe it's just because I now have such a widespread narrative in my brain that it's like I've written a book and I don't want to get rid of it.
Yeah. Let me because when I was a kid, I used to like really envy those shows where like, I mean, I can't think of a specific one, but like you open up your closet and there's a whole world in there that you can just like
Narnia?
That you discovering and learning. Well, sort of, not necessarily. I guess, kind of.
The Owl House.
The Owl House, maybe, but like just a place that you can go and escape.
That's a
and I think that kind of, but it feels safe when you're there. I almost feel like
the Owl House.
No.
Loose ain't safe there.
Well, yeah, that's different. But like, I'm saying, technically, you have this world that you can just access anytime.
Yeah.
for yourself. And I think because it's such a safe and comfortable space for you, I don't feel like you'd want to lose it for that reason.
Yeah,
Would you
honestly.
agree? Yeah?
I'd say that's a good piece of it, because it really is that I'm so used to leaning on it that it really is, you know what it's like? It's like a security blanket.
Yeah.
It's really like there's this thing I've been using for the longest time to get through my stuff, and something that I've put a lot of like mental work into, because even though I'm not like specifically writing anything down about it, it's something that like has gone through a lot of iterations and has changed, and the canon has been like slowly set in stone in certain ways. It's so weird to talk about like the internal canon of my maladaptive daydream.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Like, I have such a path in it too. Like, it literally all stems from the show, the universe of one series, and spreads out to the rest. I've made it. I've worked so hard to make sure, like, because Logan Kinney as I am, I've had to make sure that even my maladaptive daydreaming is organized and makes sense in a logistic internal canon.
That's the best thing I've ever heard of.
I love and hate it. It's such a blessing and a curse.
I mean, yeah, like, it's a blessing and a curse. It's not necessarily something I would recommend other people having, but at the same time, it works for you.
Yeah, no. At least it's a very functional coping mechanism, and honestly less damaging than most. I mean, I think so, better this than like a drinking addiction or drugs.
Yeah,
it is unharmful as long as it's not actively getting in the way of my life, which depends on the day, but like
it will.
Yeah,
it will. And I know, like, especially if I get interrupted, my mood drops, and we talked about that, but or I have trouble getting things done in a timely manner, but like at the same time, it is something that I think is very important to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, yeah, so I wouldn't get rid of it either.
A moment.
Oh my god, I'm sorry, what? I was just saying, I was just finishing off and saying I wouldn't get rid of it either.
Good.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Woo.
Love all of yourself. That's great.
Well, I don't know about that far, but like, parts.
We will not have self-deprecation here. I will throw you into the sun.
That's what you get with Tech Real as a host.
We're gonna have a moment. We're gonna have a moment. Here we go.
Let's have a moment.
God, why did you give me a maraca? What is this for?
It's for Mind Palace moments.
Mind Palace moments. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be perceived.
Oh, come on. It's for Amy and Tech.
Okay, well, it's for Amy and Tech, I guess. But like, I mean, it could have been worse. I could have gotten a kazoo.
Well, that's missing. So I.
What do you mean it's missing?
Well, I can't find it. That's why I'm using the ukulele.
I don't
Okay.
Hi, I'm Virgil. Listen to the podcast. I'm done.
More than that.
No. What do you mean I have to do more?
I don't know, a haiku or something.
A haiku. You didn't tell me to prepare a haiku. I don't have anything.
I forgot.
Done.
Virgil, I forgot to tell you. Look, like you're smart. You'll come up with something. Right?
I'm anxiety. Like, why am I doing this? Back to the podcast. Wait. That actually worked out. Hold on. Just because that worked out really suspiciously well doesn't mean I'm doing this every time, Patton. I don't like it. I don't want to do this anymore.
And that was a moment.
Man,
wow.
That was good. This is the first time we got to see that in person.
Oh my gosh.
We actually know what happened this time. And if there's two things I do love in this world, it's Virgil and haikus.
Yeah, there you go. And he did a pretty good job. I think he nailed that.
I think he did great.
Virgil.
Honestly, best form of poetry there is, in my book.
Yeah.
Fun fact about Tech Real, he do love a haiku.
He do love a haiku.
Because I don't know why specifically. I think it's just like, it's the one type of poetry I know how to write if I chose to. It's just, again, if I had any doubt in my mind that I'm a Logan Kinney, it's like, there's a structure that I can understand. 5-7-5. Easy.
I was literally already planning on asking Virgil later what the numbers were for a haiku, but you actually you solved that for me just now.
Yeah. Haikus are just a very simple arrangement of words, just 5-7-5 per stanza.
There you go. Hi, cool.
Oh my god. I don't even know how to segue out of that one, so we're just gonna get back to our subject.
Well, now we're gonna talk about Sandersack, probably, yeah?
We are. I can't wait.
We are.
Oh my god, so we did all that preamble to explain what maladaptive daydreaming is, because the idea that we have, the theory I use theory in quotes. Also, side note, it's hilarious that we've talked about in episode 1 that we weren't going to do any theories, and now there was a theory in episode 2, and now this whole episode is about a theory in all technicality, but also, these theories are not like the theory that we were talking about when we said no theories.
Yeah, we were talking about we weren't going to do theories about the future.
Yeah.
Like,
these are more theories about like what is currently the fact, like what is present, what like would happen under certain circumstances, but not necessarily what we think is going to be happening next. Just certain little bits. But the theory here, and I struggle to call it a theory even because as we're going to talk about, it's all but stated, I'd say.
All but stated, yeah.
Stated, all but confirmed, is that the series of Sandersides and the sides themselves are Thomas's maladaptive daydreams. Character Thomas, specifically. I cannot make any claims for what, real Thomas does or does not do. But the idea here is that character Thomas is a maladaptive daydreamer. Yep.
We're already, because one of the main things we see is that he already is known to have heightened anxiety. I mean, Virgil has the table, so like, discussion, so that's already part of it.
Yeah, because as we discussed earlier, anxiety is definitely a catalyst to maladaptive daydreaming. So Thomas having the strong anxiety that he does, again, Virgil, definitely puts him at an advantage for it. I don't want to say advantage because it's like a diagnosis, but like,
I wouldn't say it's an advantage. No, I'd say
he puts him in strong standings.
Makes more sense that he has it, or that this would be maladaptive daydreaming in that sense.
Yeah. Was the fact that the sides have already regularly been referred to by Thomas, others, and themselves in the series as figments of his imagination.
I mean, genuinely, the one moment that really convinces me is the moment where Joan in Can Lying Be Good is on the phone and is just like, I just don't want you to do that thing where you like sit in your room and talk to yourself for 20 minutes or whatever. And like, that's a very, very massive maladaptive daydreaming move.
To know that, like, to have your friends know that you're sitting around, like standing around talking to no one and nothing.
I heard that and went, oh, that's me.
I actually never considered this thought, but does that mean that Joan has canonically walked in on Thomas talking to the sides one day? I never really put that together.
What episode?
Oh, no, that was Can Lying Be Good.
Yeah, well, I know. Well, there's that, but I'm saying, like, what episode do we think Joan walked in talking to the sides?
None of them, because they didn't show up in any of them.
But like, it's an idea. Like what? Oh, which one? like
what would have been the ideal one to happen?
Like headcanon idea. Which episode would?
You're assuming that I can remember the exact chronological order of Sandersides pre-Can Lying Be Good. I don't. I'll say that.
I'm gonna headcanon.
It'd be great if it was accepting anxiety. Was that just because Thomas was all disheveled and unfortunate in that episode, and that would have just been a really interesting one to walk in on.
That's fantastic. I
walks in on Thomas throwing something at himself. What was thrown at him? A laptop?
Laptop.
You just see Joan just walks in and they see him like throwing a laptop in his own face, and they're just like, "I'll come back later."
Or better yet, just reacting to a laptop being thrown in his face, but there's no laptop there.
Like, that's the other thing. In this context, there wouldn't actually be a laptop because that's way too method.
He wouldn't drop that. Yeah, no, that's just the sides imagining something. That's amazing.
No, yeah, so this is all to say that they again refer to themselves regularly as imaginary. Specifically, the example I think of is the 12 Days of Christmas episode. That situation where they say that they couldn't give Tom a sweater because it was imaginary.
You can't see it.
You can't see it. These pages are
We're
blank.
right. There's no letter, there's no word music in this at all. Wow.
So, yeah, they're already... Like, that's why I say it's all but stated and all but proven, because they already are canonically part of Thomas's imagination. I guess the question at bay up until this point is, like, are they both imagination but also existing functional beings? And, like, is this a world where that can happen in that way? Where imaginations can take on a life of their own? Foster's Home is the example that comes to mind. Out of Jimmy's Head for early Cartoon Network guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Anyone know that show exists?
I know that show exists. I just haven't seen it myself.
Do?
Yes.
We're gonna talk about
Foster
this later.
home of imaginary.
No, the other one I mentioned after that.
What's the other one? Wait. Help me.
Remember earlier in this episode where I said we're working off 60% energy? This is why. This is you channeling that layman energy since I decided to be the studious one today.
This entire podcast is a maladaptive daydream right now because
whoa, it was last night for me. No, I was saying the show Out of Jimmy's Head.
Oh,
have you heard of that show?
Character in the show.
You thought there's a character in Foster's Home called Out of Jimmy's Head?
No, Jimmy.
Well, I'm sure there's a Jimmy. I can assure you that more likely than not, over the course of that however many episode long series, there was a character named Jimmy somewhere.
I didn't know.
There was a character named Mac.
So,
Anyways.
no, I haven't seen that one. No.
A few people have. It is not a great show. That spawned off of a not great movie. No offense to Out of Jimmy's Head. Just people, I guess. If anyone who made that movie is listening, sorry. You knew what you signed up for.
Damn.
No, I love it. I literally bought the DVDs of it off of eBay because I had a weird affiliation with that show for the longest time. Tangent aside, they already are imaginary. It's the question of how existent they are outside of the fact. Like, are they imaginary and living in Thomas's brain, but also have their own personalities? Whereas in this context, if they're maladaptive daydreams, they are no more real than a typical daydream.
And I mean, honestly, we've talked about this in the sense that, like, they don't actually. They've talked about how they're representations of the parts of the personality, but they haven't necessarily said that they directly control anything. So, like, I know Virgil has said. Well, here's the deal. Like, the example that comes to mind for me is when Virgil was like, I know I'm the one that's making you suspicious, but table that for another day. Mm-hmm. Like, not necessarily holding a lever and pulling it. Thomas suspicious. He's just aware that he is the embodiment of what is making Thomas suspicious. So in that sense, that kind of relieves their control of what's happening directly.
Yeah. So the fact that they have less specific, like, forceful control further is explained by the fact that logistically what he's doing, and I want to state it outwardly because we didn't really, like, explain it other than just that they're imaginary, but, like, the consensus of what's happening is that Thomas is literally standing in his living room and just, like, he's assigned these characters that he's made up to fulfill the role of his mental functions because that's how he copes with dealing with the struggles that he's going through, which, again, coping mechanism. That was a weird emphasis, but there we are. Coping mechanism.
Yeah, and I mean, on top of that, I just remembered the scene in SVS, the Selfishness versus Selflessness episode, where Janice literally says, "You're sitting on the couch with your eyes closed," and he goes, "Well, that's one of the bigger pieces of evidence." When you watch him just sitting there having that happen as SVS.
That moment threw me so hard when I first saw it. Legitimately, that broke my life, and it broke the immersion. But that's what it's supposed to do. That's what the whole point of that scene is. So it's not like that's a bad thing. It was a well done moment.
It was clever.
It was.
But that's the fact that he's doing that. If it's a compulsion, that's maladaptive daydreaming.
Yeah, and there is some evidence as to say that it might be somewhat compulsion. A specific example that I draw from, I don't remember what episode this was. It might have been the Christmas episode as well.
I got you. Which one?
I think it was 12 Days, where Roman and Patton at the beginning, they're calling him all the nicknames and urging him to do a video. They're urging him to engage. So, like, that in itself is very, you could, in a sort of roundabout way of thinking, you can use that to explain and urge to need to get into daydream mode, because it's them provoking him from having a normal day into doing it, especially because one of the two sides there is Roman creativity.
Oh my god. Okay, I need you to know. Okay, Techreal and I were talking about this before the podcast was happening, and Tech started talking about this specific thing. And
this wasn't the thing.
It wasn't?
It wasn't the thing, no.
What?
To explain what Amy's about to say, I was talking about this subject earlier to prep us for the podcast, and I started explaining something, and I was like, I have another extra piece of proof for this certain point, and Amy was like, don't tell me, I want to react in the podcast. And I was like, okay. And I believe they thought that was what this was, and it wasn't.
I got so excited just now, because that was an example I hadn't heard before. That makes so much sense.
It does, because again, it's Roman. And the other example of that in this context of it being a compulsion is Flirting with Social Anxiety, where Virgil and Roman are going around following Thomas through the mall as he's just trying to exist. And they're just sort of, again, like getting in the way and just like saying things and like, you know, and the funny thing is that's creativity and anxiety. Again, another combination of like, oh, these things kind of can form maladaptive daydreaming.
Wow.
And that's not even the thing that I was mentioning that was like a good piece of proof.
No, I'm just trying to process the idea of Roman and Patton literally pulling Thomas off of the couch. That's such a compulsive example. Yeah. That is compulsion.
And I'm sure there are other examples similar to that I can't think of at this moment. But that is the legitimate moment of, again, his creativity along with another side pulling him to engage in imagination for a bit, assuming that this is all maladaptive daydreaming.
Wow. Bro.
Okay, I did the thing again where I could see on the video. I hate my mouse.
That's fair.
Anyways.
I love it.
So, I'm trying to think if we should get to this point.
So something, well, we can get into it here in a sec, but like something that I want to kind of say that helped me kind of start to really believe this before this whole other revelation, because that would have probably gotten me over the edge too. But like this idea of Thomas having to build the story to an extent, like, and having to build what he thinks the sides look like, because they talk a lot about how, like, for example, you see Roman and Remus as black and white, or white and black, you know what I'm talking about. But like the idea that he had to build what they look like, he had to build their personality, he had to build how they connect to his personality. So like that's true in a maladaptive daydreaming sense. If you're imagining this whole scenario for yourself and learning how to cope, that you genuinely have to build the environment around you.
And sometimes you like outline the scenarios that you're going to act out and think about before you do them.
Right. And so in that sense, for example, Can Lying Be Good is a really good example of Thomas probably before the episode planning what it would look like when he has this new side that shows up. So like the real Thomas, real character Thomas, because there's now like 3 Thomases and that's confusing. But the real character Thomas actually taking the time to build who Janice is and build the idea that Janice is disguising himself as Patton. Having to, and then playing that story out because he wanted to see what that would look like for himself.
But the thing is, I don't even know if it goes that deep in the sense that he's planning them out, because I know for me, sometimes it's somewhat planned out, and sometimes I will maybe start planned out. But I know for me, when I'm maladaptive daydream a lot of the time, I'll just get into it, and sometimes new things come up as they do. So, and the thing is, I think for a lot of what he's experiencing, if these are maladaptive daydreams and he's, you know, getting in with the sides, I think he's made up these characters, but I also think that what we're seeing is him dealing with his stuff at the moment by maladaptive daydreaming, and he's improvising like on the spot. I don't know if there's too much planning. There might be. But I think some of it might also be just genuine improv. Because I know, again, sometimes that's what I do. I'll just jump into a scene, and sometimes I don't have it planned, and I'll just sort of go into it for a while and just sort of see what naturally arises.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's true for most of the Sanders Sides episodes. Like, for example, Am I Original is a really good example of something that probably he would have just done. But
yes, I think too.
Yeah.
Because again, that was a very emotional one.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good example. Because I know I would probably have something like that happen for SVS.
Yeah.
if that scenario was happening to me. But I think for Can Lang Be Good, I feel like Patton was so clearly someone else the entire time.
That's fair.
Now that you know, like, now that you've seen the end result, I know there were definitely moments when I was watching that for the first time where I was sitting there like, that was weird. And like, I don't think Thomas would just improvise a whole, that was weird. That doesn't seem like something that would be improvised in a maladaptive daydream setting.
Fair enough.
But that just goes to show it can go both ways.
It really can.
You can put it out, or you can just, because I also know that, like, from some of my daydreaming examples, I've gone like halfway through and been like, no, I actually want to erase it completely, try again with this new thing in mind. So maybe that happened.
Yeah.
Really
Honestly,
cool
that honestly could have been it. He could have been in a space where he was dealing with a situation with his normal four sides, and he realized more and more that, like, you know, Patton at the time, like, in this original, like, draft, quote-unquote, where he was dreaming it, was urging him to lie, and he felt like that maybe was something that Patton would not typically do. So to fix that, he would double back, and create a new character that would instead take the place of Patton in that moment, and then have that sort of reveal. So it's like revising, which I think that is a big part of maladaptive daydreaming as well. It's revising a story consistently.
Revising.
Again, that's what I've said. I have this internal canon that has so many different iterations that there's that revising process.
Yeah, we're talking about repetition.
Yeah, exactly, the repetition of it, and just sort of like refining it until it's the story that you feel is right in that moment. And speaking of Janice, I think that this, again, quote-unquote theory of maladaptive daydreaming, the sides and all these scenarios, also helps explain some inconsistencies, like, say, the sudden appearance of Janice and Remus as sides when... Because I feel like one thing that some fans have noticed, and something that I can notice, even though I don't take any specific issue with it, is the idea that these sides have sort of popped up out of nowhere, and Thomas has only, like, seen in recent time for the first time, when supposedly they've been around the entire time. And I think a very interesting point is brought up in the 5-year anniversary video, where Janice references an early episode of Sandersides where they do a song about lying, and he's like, I wasn't there for that. Like, you know, it's one of those ones where, like, why wasn't Janice there for that? And in this context, you can now explain that as, well, he wasn't there for that because at that point in Thomas's life, he didn't feel like he was as concerned with his lying as a nature of him enough to warrant needing a character in this maladaptive daydreaming story of his. So he pawned that off to Virgil at the time.
And you could even add to that, like, I mean, future theories aside, and we're not addressing that part.
Of course.
But, like, if it is part of the context that Janice has been there for that long in the story, Thomas just hadn't made that character yet to be able to put it into his maladaptive daydreaming story. So, like, there could be history there still, but that's just because we hadn't met him yet.
Yeah, and I think another good example is Remus. And this was one of those that when we were first concocting this idea, I really latched onto the idea of Remus because that's a really good example where Remus split off from Roman. Remus split off from Roman. That was the creativity split at some point in the timeline, and that's why we have Roman and Remus, the two sides of creativity. Now, in the view of maladaptive daydreaming, if he is using Roman originally, again, having these core 4 sides that he's using, and he has this one side that's creativity, and he notices as he's, you know, getting older, and as he's thinking of certain other things, he's noticing that there are certain thoughts that are technically creative thoughts, but he does not like filing as Roman thoughts because he has this character that he doesn't want to taint with those ideas. So that's where that split would occur, where he would need to create another creative side in order to account for the ideas that he didn't feel like he wanted Roman to be having. So, even in it's interesting that even outside of the normal canon reason of why the creativity split, there's an equal split that also happens even in this idea. So there still was a split in some way, but not in the way that he physically actually split, but in the way that he had to add another character to account for this sort of new changing definition of creativity.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that was one of my favorite things about the Roman and Remus story at all is the addition of the fact that like Thomas is a Christian to an extent. So like that idea of these thoughts being forbidden and being really like uncomfortable to look at. Yeah. I can see him being like, well, I have to add this other character because it doesn't match Roman, but it also just, I don't want them. Yeah. This is all like such a bad thing in me that I have to put it away because Roman's too good. I need this in the bad evil area. Yeah. And then he starts to build this character, and then he starts to like the character a little bit, maybe because Remus is a vibe. And like, you know, that I can see that happening too.
Yeah. So the consensus here then is that those characters, Janice and Remus, did not exist in this new canon of it being a maladaptive daydream. They didn't exist until they were necessary for what Thomas was going through at the moment, as opposed to them just being in the background and only coming out at that point.
That's fascinating.
It is, and you know, it again shows that ever-evolving story, which still works because, again, as a maladaptive daydreamer, you consistently are going back and refining the story. So now, even though, again, it's very indicative of the fact that even though they weren't there originally and that he hadn't thought of them originally, they are now, once they've arrived, they are now part of the canon. They've been form-fit into the story, even though we haven't seen any indication of that prior. Because they just didn't exist.
We might have already acknowledged this, but I know I do a lot of improv, or at least character improv. Yeah. And I know that with the absolute repetition of working with these characters, or not necessarily these characters, but just the characters that I do in general, as I'm going about my day, sometimes I will impulsively think of what a certain character would say or do in that mindset. And I think with that in mind, because maladaptive daydreaming is improvisation to an extent, I think that explains how like Roman and Virgil are, you know, walking with him in the mall. Yeah. Because like you can think of something that Roman would say, or you can think of something that Virgil would say. Like it just is really
there's always in the back of your mind.
The more you think about it. So if it is that compulsive and he is doing it like every few days or every day or whatever, it's going to be more consistent in the places he's going. Yeah. Because it's such an impulsive thought.
Even them hanging out at the end of working through intrusive thoughts, they're just sort of in the background existing as he's looking at art.
And like I genuinely
that's an interesting thought of that, because Thomas is looking at the artwork and he's just sort of existing, thinking to himself, and it's like if those are his maladaptive daydreams, the sides, and he's imagining them, that means he knows what they're saying even behind his back. So that pause could equally have been, and I'm not saying this is the case, like I don't have any evidence of this, I'd have to go back and watch to see if there's any indication, but it could have, that pause and that sort of like apprehensive feeling he had, in addition to being other things that are definitely relevant to that moment relationship wise, could also be him reflecting internally on what the sides are saying, because in this thought he's coming up with what they're saying and hearing it in his own brain because he's imagining it.
Yeah, and I mean, like
triggering himself.
I mean, honestly, because I've talked before on this podcast, you're going to hear me talk about this a lot, but I've talked before about how I use Sander sides as a language at this point, and it like, if I have thoughts throughout my day, I kind of try to attribute who said it. So I almost wonder if, like, to an extent, he's kind of character Thomas is kind of doing the same thing that I do, in that, like, he's just identifying in the moment who said what. Yeah. Instead of trying to, like, build it like a maladaptive daydream.
That's fair.
I think it could be a little bit of both, because his is, like, a little less of, like, connecting to a story that he knows versus like his is more like I'm connected. Well, I guess it is kind of connecting to a story that he knows. Yeah. It's just a story that he made.
It's a story he made up. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Which again, I mean, in some ways still, like, even as much as a lot of maladaptive daydreaming is building off of a story, it still sort of becomes a new story on its own and one of your own creations. So like, even then, even when you're building off of a story, you're still building off of your own story.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah. So
that's crazy.
Man, I'm gonna be thinking about the whole Roman and Virgil and the mall thing, because that's such a good way to like think about like how it follows you.
Yeah.
Like how it just sort of happens in the background.
Genuinely, that's how I see the Sander sides of my life like now.
Yeah.
I mean, because like, obviously the sides aren't exactly the same as Thomas's in my own head, but like, I always talk about, I said this in the first episode, I think, that I always, if I have a really bad anxiety moment and I need to like, or if I have a moment where I'm having anxiety and I need to move through it, or I've worked through it and Virgil's still present, like I could, I'm already talking like it's, hold on. Yeah. I'm having to get out of the...
You know, like explain a bit first and then get into it.
The idea that like, okay, say I said something and made one of my friends sad or something, and I worked it out in my head and I realized, I was okay. Everything happened all right. You apologized. You're moving on. I still will feel like the guilt, and I'll still feel like an intense... I have a lot of nausea with my anxiety, so like I'm just kind of sitting there feeling kind of sick, and then my thoughts are still running fast, trying to like work it out. I always attribute that to Virgil, and instead of envisioning it like, oh, I'm still really anxious, I need to figure out how to get rid of this feeling, I think about it like, oh, Virgil's sitting in the corner and he's having his own fit. Let him have his fit and go about your day. He's fine. We've already worked it out. Logan's looking at me like, everything's chill, dude. Everything's fine. Just let Virgil sit in the corner and throw a fit. And so I envision Virgil sitting in a back corner just screaming at me with all the thoughts going on in my head. And I just have to let it happen because he'll settle down soon enough.
Yeah, and because you've done this and talked about this, I've started doing it in certain times. I don't do it, I think, as frequently as you do it. But I remember there was one instance where I remember, like, it was very potent. There's a couple instances I've done it, but, like, I remember I was waiting for a bus on the way back from therapy.
Not the bus.
Because I say therapist. And I was waiting for a bus, and these buses sometimes take, like, 30 minutes. So I have time to kill, and it's, like, right on a road, so I can just talk out loud and no one's gonna hear me. Or, or like Maladaptive Daydream, as long as, like, sometimes the car stopped at the light, and I'm like, okay, let me stop for a second, and, okay, everyone's passing by, nobody's functioning on me, so that's fine. But, there was one specific time where I was, like, dealing with, I'm gonna get real vulnerable here, I was dealing with crush stuff. Whoa. Love life. But, or the lack thereof. But, no, I was, self-burn. No, but I was dealing with, crush stuff. And I was trying to get myself to stop thinking about a person because I was like, I don't want to keep hyper-focusing on this person because I've done it in the past and it's not a super healthy thing to do, to just sort of obsess over a person and just ignore any potential outcome where it doesn't work out because I don't want to, like, not keep myself in check. So I remember at that moment I was, like, thinking about the fact that you did this, like, the whole thing with the sides, and I just, like, got into, a full-on, like, conversation with, like, my inner Roman. And I was just looking at Roman like, listen, Buster Brown, you need to calm it down thinking about them. Not the coolest thing. We need to keep our expectations low. We don't know if it's going to happen. Chill the hell out, dude.
But literally, your immediate response to that is Roman's response. Like, your immediate first thought after that is, I love this. Because, like, I've always heard, like, in psychology in general, that, like, the first thought you have in reaction to something shouldn't be the thought you act on, right? You always do the second thought because it's your wiser mind and you're thinking about it a little more succinctly. That first thought is a thought of a Sander side. Like, it's one of the six. Like, it's one of them. And you have to identify which one it is to kind of identify how you want to handle it from there. Because, for example, I deal with Virgil a lot, and I have to look at Virgil and be like, okay, listen, you said this, and I agree with you to an extent, but here's why this is wrong. And then I realize that I'm talking like Logan to Virgil, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm Logan. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I want that on a shirt. Oh shit, I'm Logan.
That's my Sander side language, because it's genuinely coolest thing in the world.
So
And it helps me like identify where my values and priorities lie in the thoughts in my head.
Yeah, it's very helpful to like try to, again, like you said, pin it to a side so that you can sort of engage in that internal conversation and talk through it rather than just being at the mercy of it. Again, like we were explaining of the differences between Inside Out and Sander Sides in previous episodes.
Yeah.
Because that's the best way to focus on it.
I almost wonder if the fact that I do this and you are picking up on it, I wonder if that's maladaptive daydreaming.
I definitely would say it is. 100%. I don't have a doubt in my mind that it is, because it's you having an internal dialogue with yourself in a character setting. Especially when you just said that you in that moment were Logan and acting out as a character. That was maladaptive daydreaming. You ding dong.
Well, you know, that's the way I maladaptive daydream. Is that a surprise to anyone? No, not at all. But it's the coolest thing.
It's good.
But
Again, wouldn't recommend it necessarily, but it is a decent
coping mechanism.
I know. I go back and forth on saying if I would recommend it. I don't want to say I recommend it because it's a compulsive thing. But
okay.
But other than that, I'd say that if you... here's the thing. I wouldn't say that if you don't have it, you should strive to have it. But I'm saying if you do have it, it is a very functional and helpful coping mechanism as long as you're not letting it get too out of hand. That's what I would say. I wouldn't say you shouldn't have it. I'm saying that those who have it, it's okay to embrace it and enjoy it for what it is, as what it is. But as someone who doesn't have it, I wouldn't say you should attempt to get this compulsive disorder, basically.
So, yes.
That's my thing about it.
Well, I don't think it's even possible to get it if you don't have it.
I mean, true. The only reason I say so is because, like, I know sometimes mirroring behavior can sort of unlock that in your brain. I literally stim now because I copied it off of someone that I was watching, and like, because I thought it was a funny like hand movement thing, and I was like, wow, that is kind of satisfying, and now I stim. So like,
but that's been proven. That's been proven to work. Whereas with maladaptive daydreaming, we don't know if that works or not.
That's fair.
Either way, something that I'll say with this, because like now that I'm recognizing that my language of Sander Sides is maladaptive daydreaming, I'm surprised to myself.
I'm surprised we never talked about that before. And like clarified that as we might have.
I'm glad I'm processing that in the moment right now.
Oh my God.
But something I'll say is, I wouldn't. I recommend to people all the time who like Sander Sides to think about it this way, so that they can like organize where their thoughts are coming from. However, because this is my maladaptive daydreaming and it might be distracting for other people if you try to think about the side and who's talking and what, I would say like if you're not sure where that first thought came from, try to think about like who said that. And then not necessarily like you don't have to talk back to them, but just envisioning who that was might help you determine where in your mind you're struggling or something like that.
Because if you recognize that a thought is an anxious thought, and you can file that away as, okay, that's just my anxiety acting out. That was Virgil. That was anxiety. I'm going to put that aside because that's just me being a little spooked, and I can try to move past it.
Yeah. But I think it's, but like, of course, as we've said before, and something that Thomas, I know, has said in Sander Sides, not every thought has meaning. So sometimes if you're looking at a thought and you're like, I don't know what the fuck that was.
Remus do be a thing.
Remus do be a thing. Just let him be Remus. Let him sit back there. But anyway.
Yeah, so getting back to the theory. There is one potential plot hole. I say potential plot hole. I already have a workaround. So I even struggle to call it a plot hole because I've already fixed it. I've sealed the hole that is the plot. But of this theory, not Sander Sides, but like, anyways, the potential plot hole that people could potentially see from this is that in the canon of the universe as we have it right now, Thomas, what happened?
I made a noise. It was really close.
I didn't even process it. I don't know if it registered on the mic either.
Anyway, go ahead.
No, the potential plot hole is that canonically in the series, and it's mentioned so many times, and you know, there's an intro and outro to every video, is that these moments with the sides, he's making videos with them. even the example that we said earlier, it's Roman and Patton saying, let's make a video. The consensus is that he's making videos with the sides. The Q&A is another example of this, because it's followers interacting with the sides. So it becomes this question of like, okay, well, if he's maladaptive daydreaming, then how do you explain the fact that he's making videos in his, like in this world of his, that he's making videos with the sides, if in this context nobody should be able to see or hear them? And my answer to that is that he's maladaptive daydreaming the video part 2.
Yep.
Because I think we both said this earlier in the podcast, even, that we've both maladaptive daydreamed doing content of ours that we hope to do. And I know I've daydreamed doing content with people that I don't have access to doing content with. So it's not like that stops you.
I know I've maladaptive daydreamed like audiences and like audience responses. So this is the same type of thing.
Exactly. Like, I maladaptive daydreamed like questions that you'd be getting in for like a Q&A or something. It's definitely not outside of the realm of possibility. And it feels like a cop-out to say that, because it's like, oh, he's just dreaming that too. But like, it really makes more sense than anything that he would be. Because, again, even in the canon of the universe, they are his imagination. We established this many times. Joan, specifically, they say that he's talking to nobody. So it's not like people can even see the sides as they are. So how would he be making videos anyways? Now, this next part is the thing that we were talking about earlier, Amy. The thing that you didn't want to know until now. Now we're up to that part. Because I have another piece of evidence for the idea that the videos are maladaptive daydreams.
I'll hold on to my hat.
Hold on to your hat right now. Hold it so hard.
I'm holding on to my beanie.
My god. I still don't have a hat, but it's okay.
It's okay. I could give you one. I have so many.
Well, you physically can't. But anyways. Logan. Every day I get a little bit closer to changing my patent paperclip on the YouTube version to a Logan paperclip.
It's getting... That's probably copyrighted, probably. I don't know.
And the podcast is canceled.
Yay!
Wow. No, but the other piece of evidence... I love how you're still holding your hat, legitimately. The other piece of evidence I have for the idea that he's maladaptive daydreaming these videos is that... And this might seem inconsequential upon first glance, but he... Sorry, ADHD. Amy literally just took their hands off their hat, and then immediately as I continued speaking, threw them back on the hat, like, oh my god, wait, I have to hold my hat for this.
What I was doing, and then grabbed right back on.
This is
sorry.
Friends. No, never be sorry.
Okay, we're going good.
Yeah, we're gonna get this out. The piece of evidence I have is the idea that a lot of Sender Sides episodes start very randomly. Have you ever noticed that they just don't really... He doesn't set up a camera. He doesn't... Like, he does them on a whim. And the biggest piece of evidence I have for this is putting others first. SBS Redux, he walks in the door from the wedding, pissed out of his mind, unless his camera was sitting there recording the whole time and he was just ready for anything, he walks in and immediately goes, what the fuck's up, everyone? And just starts a video. That's not how you start a video. You have to get a camera out, you need to press a button, you need to, again, unless he had it recording the whole time, how do you start a video in that context? That's him maladaptive daydreaming the beginning of a video to cope with the situation that he just did.
I genuinely wonder, now that you've said that, if Tom even knows what maladaptive daydreaming is.
I certainly do wonder. Because it's possible. Again, there's enough evidence in the show, whether intentional or not, that makes it at least plausible that he might.
I mean, because at this point, it's pretty clear that that's what this is.
That was the big piece of evidence.
Wow. You needed my reaction on the podcast, didn't you? Mm-hmm.
I'm very happy about it. What?
You needed my reaction on the podcast.
I did. I'm very happy I got it.
I'm glad I got it.
No, legitimately, that is the biggest piece of evidence that I came up with. I think I thought about this like literally last night as I was going to bed. I was like, I just had like several more notes to do on this podcast before we did it. Great. And I was like, oh my god, wait a minute. He's literally walked into things. Again, Roman and Patton before urge him to do a video, and he's like, okay, starting a video. And he just immediately starts a video with no other prompting. He didn't prepare a video, and he starts a video out of nowhere. No press a button, no camera, no nothing. He just begins.
I'm floored. Wow.
That's the thing.
That's crazy.
Isn't that the weirdest thing?
Yeah.
So that is the biggest proof that he's just sitting there and starting to maladaptive daydream a video. Because there's no preamble, there's no beginning prep. He just goes. When he needs to, he just starts a video.
And it's super common, I know for me, like if you just got back from a really stressful situation, like if you really had a hard conversation or something and you need some time to yourself, immediately you want to do it so bad.
You launch right into maladaptive daydreaming. You do.
Oh, every time.
You're just like, I need to be alone with my thoughts in my daydreams right now.
And then immediately get into the daydream space.
Legitimately.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'll be in the bathroom during a family event. I'll go to the bathroom and I'll just get entranced in it for a second. It's so the bathroom is such a specific place
for it. That's dude.
So yeah, that is the biggest piece of evidence that I can provide. That's really my last piece of specific evidence over this, again, quote unquote theory. I consistently, I'm never gonna stop quote unquoting because I hate to call it a theory with how close to the truth it already is.
Literally.
It's already so close to what's canon that it basically, I'm never gonna call it canon unless proven so by the series itself. But it is
more a headcanon, I guess. Then
it definitely is a headcanon. But it's a headcanon with a lot of sufficient evidence that makes it likely. Because again, I don't want to. My pet peeve in not only this fandom but every fandom. I have a pet peeve with every fandom. I'm going to unleash right now. My pet peeve is when people will headcanon something and then not only treat it like it's canon, but specifically say that it's canon. They will act as if it's canon when it's never been fully stated by the show or even a writer. And that drives me up the wall because it's not canon. And they will hate on people who think otherwise because they've such established this headcanon. And it drives me nuts. So that I strive to never make that mistake by calling this canon. I would never call this canon until it were to show up in the series, if it ever did.
Right.
But it is my very strong evidence-backed headcanon.
There's a lot of evidence to it. And honestly, now that some of the introductions, it makes sense to me now. Yeah. I'd never thought of it that way, and I'm so glad I do now.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, it explains also another big point of contention for a lot of fans, which is a lot of the early depictions of the sides. The sides are quite different as they are now than they used to be. A lot of people will point out how smiley Logan used to be. Or, again, Virgil, the way he was, everyone. They were all, a tad bit different, and they've been refined over time, and that is explained by, again, repetitious maladaptive daydreaming, getting the characters along. So it's funny that the explanation of why they've changed in an outward meta sense of Thomas crafting the characters and evolving them over time is also the exact same reason why in universe, if this were to be true, would be the same reason, because he's still using them and he's changing them as he goes because he gets a better idea of what he wants them to be. Mm-hmm. And honestly, this, again, not to cop out too much, but this also explains any possible plot hole ever. Because or inconsistency, you can always explain it away as that was just, it was it's all a maladaptive daydream. It's not true. It doesn't have to be consistent.
He's not necessarily as much as one of the things that's beautiful about maladaptive daydreaming in the realm of it being story is it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect.
No, it only is what you need it to be.
What you need it to be. So I'm gonna bring it up because I love it. Yeah. Virgil rises up time. Virgil rises up. That's just an example of maybe that was a day that Thomas just didn't process, or character Thomas just didn't process that. Yeah.
Or he hadn't decided yet that wasn't a thing that he just does typically.
Or he tried it once and he was like, nope, not doing that again. Virgil's gonna show up like that.
Yeah. It's just so interesting. And again, it feels like a cop-out because it feels like saying, it feels like an excuse of saying that Thomas can do no wrong because now in this idea, he is infallible. He can't do anything bad because now you can always explain it away as maladaptive daydream. But that's not the intention behind it. That's just sort of a byproduct, a byproduct of it. And not something that we really need to lean on because as much as it is maladaptive daydreaming, if it is, I should say, that in terms of the series, they still have their consistent plot lines and arcs that, you know, he's going to use and he's going to lean on, and he's going to keep as consistent as possible. So really that the idea of this does not impact what you're watching outside of just knowing what it is. And the sad reality. This is the part that I struggle with, and I'm going to level with everyone, and I'm going to, like, sympathize with everyone dealing with it, because I have trouble with this with a lot of different aspects of, like, media, where I'll get into in a second, but, like, this idea, this theory, quote-unquote, means that the sides, again, like I said earlier, are no more real than a typical daydream, which means that they aren't existing characters. Like, they don't function on their own. They are just something that Thomas thinks of, and they don't exist outside of that. So, it's funky, because we're also used to anthropomorphizing the sides and thinking they exist as their own little people, doing things and existing when Thomas isn't around. And under this theory, they really aren't. They don't. They aren't functioning. They are no more real than you imagining a side right now. And that's sad.
To an extent, it could be proven, like, with the way that I talk, I guess the way I daydream the side, I'm going to have to get used to saying it that way. Yeah. The way that I have to daydream the sides, technically they're with you all the time because they're part of you, but at the same time, like, I wouldn't say that they are.
But they're not real. They're not a functional being.
Reading, huh?
They're not a real functional being, yeah.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think, like, when I'm not thinking about what Logan's doing, he's back in the back of my mind reading a book or something. Like, he's just not there.
Yeah.
Or he's just functioning without me thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
It's just a weird thought.
I know you struggle with that idea more than I do.
I do, and I struggle with it with your own original character. So, for clarification for me, do you mind if do you want to explain Steve, or should I?
I might explain Steve, at least the baseline.
I wanted to give you that option because I didn't want to just take control of explaining your original character.
No, you're valid. So for those of you that don't know this, my character, I have one main original character. His name is Steve. He is an artificial intelligence android who basically is my support robot. Mm-hmm. Who just my android who follows me around and he helps me make videos. He helps me just do life in general. And for a while I had him existing all the time with literally me, but now I've had it to where, like, there is a whole different kind of character, Amy, that he follows around, and that's a whole different character now as well. But I'm also a massive fan of artificial intelligence, so the idea that Tekril and I have struggled with the idea of Steve loving people, because to an extent he does love people, but, like, he can't love people in the same way that humans can. He can appreciate you. He can, like, I can't even think of words anymore. It's just like,
he doesn't have emotions in the same way that people
that
humans
so, like,
do.
He can't really love. He can't really feel joy. He can't really feel that type of emotion. Yet he can acknowledge your like, he can feel usefulness for himself, and he can feel, like, respect and support to the other people. So, with that being said, Tekril, talk about how you feel in that sense.
I'm sad. No, because I have a tendency, I think, in a lot of media, but here is a very good example of anthropomorphizing characters, maybe a bit more than they were originally intended.
Great.
So, I have a big heart. I have a big old Patton heart. Patton is hanging over me on a poster right now. He's just looking over me like, feel things, do it. And then I'll give you a cookie. As long as you're buying my desires with a cookie, then yes.
All right.
No, but I anthropomorphize a lot of characters. So, like, when it comes to Steve, I have a hard time accepting the idea that he does not have actual emotions, and that, like, because in the idea of this canon, like, me and Steve are buds. I always like the idea that me and Steve are buddies, and I've hung out with Steve, quote unquote, in a content sense, that we've done that stuff together. And so the idea of me existing in a world with Steve and being buddy with him and showing him love, and then him not actually feeling that for me back in a real sense, like, because he has no emotions, hurts immensely.
Like, it's... and
Amy's joy.
Well, that's the thing. That's where I kind of go, like, well, he loves you in the best way that he can. Because, like, you said, like, he doesn't feel the same way. Like, in the way that he can, yes, he does feel the same way. But he doesn't feel it in that, oh my God, I love you. Yeah. He feels it in, you are a big support to Amy. You are a really kind person. I respect you. Like, those thoughts are going through his head. But, like... if like it's harder because he's a machine.
Yeah, there's no specific adoration in that sense.
So yeah, in the same sense then, like the fact that the sides are imaginary and they don't exist outside of the realm of the story in this concept is more sad.
It is, because I know when I first thought of it, I got sad because I was like, oh no, like that means like if you were in the world of Sandersides as it is now, or in this concept, then that means that you wouldn't be able to meet the sides. I mean, even in the world as it is right now, you wouldn't be able to meet the sides. But like, even in the context of like, oh, if you were a side in this world somehow, which doesn't make sense really, but like, if you were one of his sides by any means, or be able to access that world, you still wouldn't get to hang out with the sides, because in this concept anyways, because they are just imagination and nothing more.
It's funny to me that like it's funny and sad to me that I don't feel the pain of that. I think it's just because I find canon so interesting. Like the closer it is to reality and the closer it is to how we really function in the world, or like with Steve, the closer it is to real artificial intelligence, the more excited I get. Yeah. But I will say, because I thought of this right before we did the podcast actually, but like technically, if we're thinking of it that way, and we're thinking of the idea that the videos are also maladaptive daydreamed, or daydreamed, are part of the daydream, then technically we, the audience, are also part of the daydream. And therefore, we can interact with the sides because we are all part of the daydream together.
Yay! They are real to us in a way. Real.
Does explain things like in-character live streams. Like when Tom has done that with the sides, or when I've done that or whatever. Like, it's just that type of reality that we can interact with them that way. Yeah. If you want to look at it that way.
That's wonderful.
Wowza.
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 I thought you were going to say wowzers. I thought you were going to channel your inner Inspector Gadget. I was about to get real excited.
Wowzer.
I went a different direction, and I don't know that
I haven't seen Inspector Gadget, unfortunately.
Oh, well, all he says is wowzers, I think.
Wowzers.
Does he? I've seen the live action movies. I'm painfully understudied on Inspector Gadget. I know of Matthew.
I guess I can hear the Inspector Gadget fans in the audience right now freaking out.
Especially because I almost said that Matthew Lillard was Inspector Gadget, which is absolutely false. I was thinking of Matthew Broderick.
I'm so sorry to any Inspector Gadget fan out there.
I know. Not only have I insulted the Inspector Gadget fans, I've insulted the Matthew Lillard fans, which is sadder because I freaking love Matthew Lillard. Just as an actor.
Another reason to cancel the. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Cancel the podcast. Has there been an episode yet where we haven't been like, cancel the podcast?
It's become such a running joke.
Honestly, it has to just keep going. We just need to have a reason to cancel the podcast. Oh my gosh. Okay. But yeah.
Oh, wow. That was a whole discussion, bro.
That really was. That is the theory, quote unquote.
I love that.
I do too.
That's fine, you had canon.
It is. And honestly, as bittersweet as it is, I don't think I can not think of it as a thing anymore. Which is not to say that I'm not going to completely anthropomorphize the sides as I continue to watch Sandersides. Of course I will, because I'm tech real. It's what I do. But like, you know, I don't think you have to give that up, even if you believe in this theory. Because at the end of the day, the funny thing is, like, in a sort of roundabout way, if this theory is true, it really doesn't impact how real the sides are in a sense, because logistically, they are no less real than they already were. So, Not
Nothing
that
changed.
that makes it super better, but like it's not like you're losing something because they were already works of fiction to begin with. It's not like you were going to meet them specifically to begin with outside of like him doing an in-character live stream or some sort of meetup situation. Like it already was that. So like there's a way to sort of be like, okay, well I can't get too sad about this. I wasn't gonna meet Virgil anyways, so it's not like that ruins that potential.
Yeah.
You know.
Welcome to the Side-ology podcast, where we make you question everything, and then everything's fine. You don't even have to worry about it.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say Side-ology, with the podcast where we ruin your dreams.
Then bring them back.
And then bring them back. See, this is why I know we've talked about the idea that like you're the Hank Green and I'm the Matt Pat of the podcast, and I think in the sense of what I just did of like logically finding a way that sort of ruins things, I think Matt Pat does a real good job of that with a lot of children's shows. He will take a children's show and be like, I'm gonna ruin your childhood. And I love him for it.
Wait, my heart can't handle that. Let me find another way. Wait.
Which is funny because logistically, the types of people we are typically, that role should be reversed because that's me being like, no, my emotions. What?
Anyway, all right. So we need to close up.
We do, but first, we do have something to mention for our next episode.
Yeah.
Would you like to say it?
The next episode, we're thinking about doing a Q&A. So if you would like, please submit your considerations for questions, if you have them, based on the past 3 episodes of the series.
Yeah.
Or this podcast. It's important to note, however, like if you want to ask questions about like some things relating to Sanders Sides that you think we're going to talk about that we haven't talked about yet, I promise we're probably going to get there. We have like a ton of episodes planned out.
Yeah.
So please keep the questions to like specifically about the past 3 episodes that we've had.
Yeah, the past episodes are like even just about ourselves if you want to know.
Yeah. But we're going to be putting an email.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're gonna say it out loud also because the audio viewers. Oh, yeah. Because I was gonna say is like we need to say it regardless. But first of all, there's probably already, as this episode's gone up, there might already, or at least currently now, be a post over on the various Side-ology social medias, on the Twitter, Instagram, and Threads, or should I say the X, Instagram, and Threads. So there's gonna be a post. There's gonna be posts over there prompting for the Q&A as well. But in addition to that, if you'd like to send your questions through email, you can do so through Side-ologypodcast@gmail.com. And then just send over your questions. Like I said, like Amy said, we're going to avoid a lot of questions, most likely that regard things that we'll be talking about in future podcasts, or things that have any regards to theories of what's coming next in Sanders Sides, because again, we have a theory we're not going to get to until it comes out. But yeah, we will be happy to answer your questions next episode, because I mean, people who have followed my content up until now know that I love a good Q&A. I'm living for this next episode.
Yes, and I think there's just a lot of I want to breed room for other people to join the conversation to an extent, because there's other perspectives that we may not have considered, especially in this maladaptive daydreaming.
Oh yeah.
Because we were just talking about how like there's some people who maladaptive daydream but don't actually get up and act it out. Like, what is that like? If you have that experience, let us know.
Yeah, or if you have questions about what we've talked about so far and you need further clarification, we can just do our best to revisit certain subjects briefly, to sort of clarify anything that may not have come across perfectly at the time.
So what was the email again?
It was Side-ologypodcast@gmail.com. I'm going to sneakily, very, very sneakily, in front of my face on the video, sneakily look at my phone to make sure I actually have that email correct, because I'm not confident even a little bit.
I'll distract. I'll keep distracting.
It's Side-ologypodcast@gmail.com.
There you go.
We did it. Fantastic. I needed to be very sure, because I was like, I don't want to look back and be like, oh, I got it wrong.
Also, another thing that I want to mention is the research articles that we've been looking at to talk about these different topics are also going to be in the description of the YouTube videos.
Yeah, whether we specifically said quotes from them or not, what we used is going to go in these descriptions. 'Cause I know there are certain articles that we brought up that we have in our research that we didn't actually specifically draw from fully. So but whatever we used.
I will be damned if we talk about psychology and we don't cite our sources, because my psychology teachers will all come running after me very quickly. I can feel them coming if I don't do that. So we're going to do that.
We're going to throw the articles down there. And that way, people who are interested in the subjects can also learn a bit more if they desire to. So they'll be in the description of the YouTube version of this podcast at youtube.com/@Side-ology. With a dash. Fun fact, you have to put that dash in there. I learned that recently because somebody else also has a channel that doesn't have really any videos on it that's called Side-ology. So,
how dare they?
Oops. It's okay.
How dare they?
I don't think they're using it that much, so I think it's fine. You got to throw that dash in there. It's a very important dash. Our little bud, Dashy the Dash.
Wow.
New mascot. We're not making that a thing. Slowly contemplates making that a thing.
Oh, anyway.
It probably won't be.
Let us know in the Q&A.
No. Ask questions about Dashy the Dash lore.
Dashy the Dash.
Oh,
anyway,
kill me.
All right, we've got to end this off.
Please, before I dig a bigger grave.
I hope y'all had fun listening to us ramble about all this.
Indeed.
It's been so much fun talking about this with you, Tech Girl.
This honestly was, I think, my favorite episode yet to record.
I love it so much.
Because it started a little funky. I think we both were in a weird energy space at the beginning because we were just tired. But, like, I really perked up as this went through. I don't know if that showed specifically, but I love this subject. I really
fascinating.
do.
And be ready for more because we definitely have way more episodes coming at you every week on Saturday.
On Saturdays, yes.
On Saturday. Every week on Saturday.
Every Saturday.
And be ready because we got more content coming for you.
More questions, more analysis, more moments.
More Side-ology, baby.
Psych-ology.
Psych-ology.
Wonderful. Suck that landing.
Hey, have a good week, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Goodbye, peeps.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.